Hello and welcome to Catacris Magazine. We can be found on the web at www.catacris.com. I am Jason J. Rock Houston. Our special guest today is session bassist Ronnie Robson. And I must, at the top of the interview, thank our mutual friend Christina Avila for putting me in touch with Ronnie. She's been giving me a lot of great interviews, so thank you, Christina. And let's get right into it, Ronnie. Now, I was reading that you started playing music at the young age of 7, and you actually started out on the classical piano. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, my parents threw me into piano. My sister and I into piano when I learned at the Royal Conservatory of Music, and I learned basic, theory and played along with what the teacher was instructing me. But I liked it and I didn't like it at the same time. Yeah. It was the instrument that I didn't want to be playing, But I'm really glad that my parents did push that because, I could read music, I understand, a lot of theory, and it's put me where I am today.
Yeah, and oddly enough, interesting thing about that, a lot of people actually, when they start out on the piano and then move on to other instruments for whatever reason. And I'm told that also learning to play the piano, it helps you in writing music.
It did. It really did. I mean, my transition to guitar was quite easy, and then later to bass. Also in high school with playing trombone, and I played clarinet. But I went back to trombone, and I actually played in the show band, which was pretty cool.
Yeah. Now you mentioned that you played at the Canadian Royal Conservatory of Music. Talk a little bit about what that is. I mean, because I hear a lot of people talking about it. It seems like it's a pretty big deal.
Well, yeah, it is a big deal. It has been a big deal for a while. If you want to learn your instrument properly with theory, with certified instructors, that is the place to do it. And they just changed the name actually to the Oscar Peterson Conservatory of Music. And Oscar Peterson was a great jazz player, piano player in Canada.
And so when you start,
I was fortunate enough to meet him a couple of times.
Oh wow!
My band's rehearsal hall was right next door to his, so yeah, it was pretty cool.
So let me ask you, when you go there and you're learning your instrument, you're learning how to play, do they teach you all kinds of different type of music, or is it specifically jazz, or?
Yeah, basically what you do is, you start off with, learning scales. That teaches you fingering on the instruments, and then, theory with that. So it depends what you're playing, right? But
yeah.
If you're playing guitar, then, a good teacher will say, what kind of music are you, interested in, right?
Yeah.
So, and then they'll kind of lean towards that, but still keep the basis with theory and scales.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, don't realize how important that is. I mean, even if you want to be like a rock musician or something, because like I said, for example, starting on the piano will help you with, writing. And also if you learn other instruments, for example, it makes you a more rounded musician. And as far as learning different types of music, I mean, once you get to the point of being a professional musician, it also opens a lot more doors if you can play more than just one style of music.
Exactly. And I mean, I've done a lot of heavy rock and metal.
Yeah.
But also, I can do blues and I can do, your top 40 stuff. But it's really like even music instruction now, when I'm looking at recording a song, it's just like second nature to me. I know to do this run, and if the vocalist is doing certain things, then, I'll change it up for harmony or whatever for the vocalist or the guitar or the keys or whatever. Yeah. But strictly, the rhythm section is what I was most interested in. That was the most, that made my heart and soul pound. So that's why I'm here today where I am.
Yeah, very interesting, because I mean, people will be surprised to learn, I think, that even like guitar shredders like Randy Rhoads and Jakey Lee played with Ozzy, they were into classical music, learning how to play the piano, and before they ever picked up a guitar. And in fact, even Randy Rhoads, who played with Ozzy Osbourne and Quiet Riot, I mean, there was talk if he had lived that he would have. He wasn't really much into metal himself. He was much more into classical playing, and that's what he wanted to do had he lived. So again, you just never know.
Well, exactly. And it's funny, too, because I went back to playing a little more piano than I have been in the past, 20 years. And it's like riding a bike. It's, I'm starting to do things, but when I do things, I'm starting to do them in a classical sense.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I have my favorite classical pianist, too. So, Mozart, Bach, Chopin, that kind of thing. But, I mean, it's music education is important. It's great to pick up guitar and learn, chords and to learn to shred if you want to do that. But you know what? Fundamentals are really, really important.
Yeah, and you mentioned like Beethoven and Bach. I mean, anybody that's a musician. I mean, these are legendary musicians, and many people may not think so. But talking about building a legacy, okay, think how many years since those guys died that people have been kind of listening to what they did.
Exactly. It's amazing. It really is. Because sometimes I'll listen to someone's piano track that they did, and you can really, really tell who their influences were. When you really get down to it, you can really, really tell.
Yeah. And and then I was reading, learning different instruments at the age of 12. You switched over to guitar now. Like a lot of kids, I imagine, you were into rock music, and that was kind of like, I want to be a guitar player and learn how to play my favorite licks. But, what was that like switching from piano to guitar for you?
It was pretty easy. A lot of people in my neighborhood had bands. They play guitar. I also went for guitar lessons. Mm-hmm. I continued that education, and it was like an easy transition for me. And I played probably in 4 or 5 different bands between 12 and 14, 15, and then I switched over to bass because there wasn't any good bass players in my neighborhood. There's something about rhythm and the rhythm section, drums and bass.
Yeah.
As I just previously mentioned, that it really kicked my heart and soul.
Yeah. So, did you learn lead playing as well, or were you more of a rhythm player?
I was more of a rhythm player.
Okay.
Than a lead player.
Yeah, because like you said, rhythm was really doing it for you. And then like, who were some of your guitar heroes growing up, or even at age 12 that were kind of you were looking at?
Jimmy Page, number one.
Uh-huh.
I loved him. Jeff Beck, I loved him. Yeah. There's a few. Billy Gibbons, ZZ Top.
Oh yeah.
Another guy that I just absolutely loved. I love listening to probably the most because and tried to pick up his style of playing and things like that. I wish I had YouTube back then.
Oh yeah.
It would have made my life easier for sure.
Yeah.
But you know what? Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, also like Pat Travers, and David Gilmour as well.
Yeah.
David Gilmour is soloing was my favorite.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Oh wow. And now talk about moving over to bass. How old were you when you started playing the bass?
Probably about 14 or 15. I started picking it up, playing in other bands that are, like extra bands that I was in, because I wasn't hearing what I should have been hearing.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, if I switch over to bass, I can try to make an impact.
Uh-huh.
And I did, because I really understood the fundamental relationship between drums and bass. So that was my easiest step that I've ever done, was just moving to bass. And I played a lot with older musicians too, and that helped.
Wow.
And I thought, you know what, this is my instrument. I love making people move, and this is it for me.
Yeah.
And I stayed with it.
Wow. And so who are some of your bass heroes?
John Paul Jones.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
From Zeppelin, love him. Love Flea, Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah, and as far as John Paul Jones, I mean, he's like the legendary guy. But were you impressed with the fact not only is he a great bass player, but he brought like keyboards into Led Zeppelin music?
Exactly. He did arrangements.
Yeah.
Mandolin. He did it all, and I mean, just a great bass player. John Entwistle was another one.
Oh yeah, legendary. Yeah.
I liked Nathan Watts. He played a lot with Stevie Wonder too.
Wow.
And and a little bit later on, I had the Steve Harris from Iron Maiden.
Okay, and now you've been saying how you really are driven by the rhythm part of a band. Now, on that front, I was curious. Did you ever learn to play the drums at all?
Yes.
Okay, talk a little bit about that, because when you're playing the bass and the guitar, you're up there kind of the front of the stage with the rest of the band. But when you're a drummer, you're in the back of the stage. So, have you ever got experience like being up on stage as a drummer?
Yeah, actually. My first gig I ever did in my life, I was on drums.
Wow.
And I had a good friend that lived down the street from me, down the road. His name's Steve Jackett. He was an older friend, and we used to get together and we would jam things out on drums and bass, and then we would switch.
Oh, okay.
Right? He was also like saying, "Come on, you got to learn to play drums too." So we would play for hours. I mean, we lived out in the middle of nowhere, and it's like a 20-minute walk or whatever to his house.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else to do, so we would just jam, and we'd have such a good time. But and you know what? I still play drums. I still every once in a while I'll track my own tracks with drums.
And so, like, the bass is your instrument because that's your primary instrument that you play on most of the stuff you do. But rhythmically, what is it about the bass that you just love the way you can kind of groove on it, or what?
Yeah, it's laying down the foundation with the drummer, keeping the pocket, getting into the groove, staying in the groove, and also like when a drummer and a bass player are tight, they seem to we smile at each other, because we know that we're driving, and then being able to accent off other musicians, the vocalist, does scream and you can do a run great, or the guitars or keys, then that makes it even more better. So, but it's that solid foundation.
That's what you always hear of a rhythm section. But what I was interested in for years, I heard stories about the fact because they were brothers, that Eddie and Alex Van Halen, not a bass player, but the guitar player and the drummer actually, that they were the two guys in that band so kind of interlocked with each other just because of I don't know if they were brothers or they grew up together, the blood thing, but they were saying when they'd go in the studio and they'd cut tracks, they could predict what the other guy was going to play before he even played it. I mean, that's kind of amazing too when you hear stories like that.
No, exactly. And it's funny too because Glenn Drover and Sean Drover, both ex-Megadeth.
Yeah.
They used to jam together all the time. Same thing. They knew exactly what they were going to do. Yeah. And Glenn actually told me that. He says, "Oh yeah," he goes, "My brother's just tight. Like we know."
And so this is maybe a kind of strange question because it's obviously that when you're locked in with the drummer, it makes for a great rhythm section. But have you ever had the experience where you're not as locked in with the drummer, you just can't kind of meet where that guy's at in the band or what he's doing?
Yeah. You know what? There's been a few drummers where it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
We just didn't. We
didn't lock
click.
in. Yeah, for whatever reason. Yeah, and
and then there's time where drummers would put in the odd fill where it was like an off-time fill or whatever, and I was thinking to myself, "Wow, I'm glad." I wish we had rehearsed that.
Yeah.
It would have sounded good if we were on the money, but I mean, things happen. But there's been a few drummers where it just didn't happen.
Now you've taken a different career path than most musicians in the sense that when I introduced you at the top of the interview, I was saying session bassist Ronnie Robson. Now what do you think? Talk a little bit about your career path as opposed to maybe you either joining an established band or forming your own band as opposed to I'm going to be a session guy. Talk a little bit about that. How you got on that career path.
Well, when I finished high school, I didn't know quite what to do. I thought, okay, let me figure it out. So I started working at a recording studio in Toronto, and the odd time people would say to me, hey, can you put a bass track down, or can you put a drum track down, or even keys? And I would say, yeah, no problem. And I would do it either if they were there or when they left.
Wow.
And then they'd come back and they'd have a listen. And I really kind of liked that. I thought, okay, you know what? I would rather be behind the scenes than in front.
Yeah.
And I always knew that, right? But I mean, if a band said, "Hey, man, hey, can you fill in, do some live shows?" I was like, "Yeah, okay."
Yeah.
But even today, like with the home recording studio, I'd rather be at home, do what I want to do, take my time.
Yeah.
You know what? Throw out a great track for whoever that I'm working with, and be comfortable doing it instead of in a rush. Instead of I really hated walking into other recording studios with bands and recording. I didn't like the pressure. I didn't like the deadline. I didn't like anything like that. So it's what I'm comfortable with, and I'm still comfortable with it. Not saying that if a great band phoned me up and said, "Hey, man,
let's hit the road
for bass for a tour,"
yeah,
then I would do it. But I would rather, especially in this part of my life, this time of my life, I would rather just do what I do, kind of living a kind of quiet life and relaxing.
Yeah, last week when we tried to do an interview, I think you shared with me too that another kind of interesting aspect about the career path you took is pretty much right out of high school that you've been doing these recording sessions nonstop. And again, that's not the typical trajectory of most musicians. I mean, if you want to become a touring musician or even a recording artist, most musicians, you start off writing the songs in a garage, and then you find the band members, and then you try to get people to come, see you play live. And so it's kind of interesting that you've kind of been playing nonstop from what you told me ever since you decided you wanted to become a professional musician.
Yeah. No, and that's true. That's one thing that I always did. I had my career path.
Yeah.
The one that was going to pay me the most money, and that's what I did. But I always did music and film on the side, right?
Yeah.
So I still had that. I still had that interest and input in it, but it wasn't my main focus. It wasn't. As I said, again, if somebody said, "Hey, can you fill in?" I'd be like, "Yeah, no problem."
And you have these guys that take the a regular kind of career path of forming a band or joining a band and trying to get a recording contract, and even that in the modern music business is nothing like it used to be when we were growing up. And so it's a lot more harder to do something, even when you're trying to form a band and even get a record deal. Once the band gets going, if you're successful, then a lot of times guys kind of get complacent with what they're doing, in the sense of there's that pressure, kind of like what were you saying, the debut album sold 1 million copies, we got to make an album that's equally as good, or just that sells just as good, if we want to keep our record contract. And so there's all this pressure that a session musician doesn't necessarily have.
Right, exactly.
And
it's funny growing up, and seeing what in Canada especially, friends, popular bands, well-known bands, what they actually went through and had to go through. That was another thing too. We'd be sitting around the studio, and they would be, basically, I make so and so a week if we play. They own the record company, right?
Yeah.
So, it was one of those things where it was like, man, now it's like a job.
Oh yeah.
It's not like, And I thought to myself, I would rather have a job. I think.
Yeah.
Something that pays me a little more money, with benefits, with everything, with a pension, and and I watched this, Jason. I watched this, and it was like, I don't think I want to be part of this.
And then also, if you're gonna join any type of band, there's also the issue of do you get along with other guys in the band? What's that chemistry like? And then a lot of times people start fighting over silly issues like everybody wants to write a song so they can get royalties, and who's going to write all the songs and all that, and who gets to sing, and just crazy stuff like that the bands break up over.
Oh yeah. And then there's management. There's everything, and the bands start fighting about that, and distribution, and touring, and things like that. And I mean, you know what? If it works, then it's magical.
I mean, you look at some of these great classic rock bands. I think when we tried to do the interview last time, that we were talking about the band Creedence Clearwater, where the two brothers. I mean, by the end of the band, they hated each other because one guy started out as a lead singer, and the record company decided, the younger brother sings better, so we want him to do all the singing, and then even one of the brothers died, and the one that lives, John Foghead, he refers to him as my former bandmate, not even my brother. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, I know. That's crazy. That's crazy. Something that I would never want to experience.
Wow.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
And that's where I am right now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I like it. There's really, a record deal back, like from now back to the 70s is like, it doesn't happen that way anymore. You're lucky to get a good, half-decent distribution deal.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, wow.
And I tell musicians all the time, like, don't put out an album, put out, 8 singles a year. Then, if you want to add 2 more and make an album, then do it. But other than that, keep people's interest by just releasing singles.
Oh, yeah. And that's the funny thing about, a band like Creedence. They were really a singles band, but, and that's the amazing thing, in that little short time that band was together, look at the quality of the music they created.
Oh, yeah. Amazing stuff. I mean, Creedence is one of my favorite bands, definitely. I still listen to them now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even all these years later, they're one of my favorite bands. And, John Fogerty, he's still doing it. And, talking about all the animosity that was in that band, there was a point, like, for about 10 years where he refused to play any of those hit songs. But he's back doing it now, I guess, because I guess he realizes, well, those are the songs that made me, kind of famous. That's why people come and see me to play those songs.
Yeah, exactly. And I think my friend Tony Franklin, the Fretless Monster, I think he was doing some shows with him too. Yeah. And Tony Franklin is such a good guy. He's a great guy. He was in the Firm with Jimmy Page and Paul Rogers.
Oh yeah, and then of course there's that other little band. He had one album with Blue Murder, but everybody, John Sykes, everybody wishes would get back together. And Tony was involved with another project that he has going on currently called Renaissance Rockworks. They made their debut in Las Vegas recently, and that's kind of got that big kind of 80s rock sound, like kind of sound like Journey and Whitesnake and Queen, but they got their own kind of original music as well. So that's a project that I'm kind of currently following, but I really urge people to check out.
So do I. I mean, it's amazing. And Christina Villa,
she's connected with that.
They're promoting them too, which is fantastic. Yeah, I've been listening to a lot of their stuff over the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, in fact, there's a song from one of the earlier albums they did called "To Be With You." You can go on YouTube and check this out. And when I interviewed the keyboard player, Greg Fox, about it, who's the principal songwriter, I was saying, that song, Greg, "To Be With You," I don't know, but listening to it, it feels like it's just torn out of a page of somebody's life. And he told me, oddly enough, he says that song is based on a girlfriend I had that died of cancer a few years ago that I was really close to her. And of course, when you go through something like it's gonna affect you. But I mean, just in listening to the song, you could kind of feel like this song means something really to somebody, whoever, the writer. You could hear it.
Yeah. No. Exactly. There's a song that Marco Mendoza, another bass player, great bass player, did. I can't remember the name of the song, but it's been getting a lot of play as well. The same thing about love for his wife, love for his family, which is really, really cool. And it's a great song. Same thing. You can tell it was written from the heart and soul. Oh yeah,
Marco Mendoza. Okay, excuse me, not Twisted Sister. That's Mark Mendoza. Marco Mendoza is the guy that played with Whitesnake, then Lizzie, the Dead Daisies, and he recently put out a solo album. He's one of those guys too that kind of multi-talented. So anything that he's involved with, yeah, I'd say to check out.
Oh yeah, and he's playing with Journey right now.
Oh wow, I wasn't aware of that. How cool is that? And
he's out with Journey. I mean, he's solid there, backup vocals and everything else. Like another great musician that I really look up to is Mendoza for sure.
Oh yeah, and he's multi-talented, and I know he's got a solo album where he even sings lead, and so I urge people to check that out. It's got some pretty good stuff on there. But getting back to you, Ronnie, I want to talk a little more about being a session player, because again, I think what would make that kind of an interesting career is like when you've got an established band, you know, and the band has kind of an established sound. You know, for example, you know, if you're a Metallica fan, you know, so you expect them to kind of have a certain sound, and then when they do something like the Black Album, people kind of you either love it or you hate it. But so being a session musician, you don't really know what you're going to get.
No. But you know what? It's funny because I would say 90%, probably late 80s, early 90s, the percentage-wise, when I get a song, I giggle. Yeah. Right? I mean, it's a good song. It's got, you know, like a great drummer on it, you know, like Hollywood Monsters had the majority with Vinny Appice from Black Sabbath and Dio. Yeah. And I mean, you know, when I get drum tracks from him, I just would laugh. Yeah. You know, they're so good. They're recorded great. You know, and we would try to push the song even higher. You know, so it's really cool. But yeah, you know, I would get stuff. I would get like lead guitar from somebody and think, God, man, that's different than what I'm used to hearing from them.
Yeah.
Wow. Or vocals, same thing. But yeah, man. Yeah, I never got a bad tune from anyone. Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, like when you are in, let's say, your own band or an established band that you're playing with that you know you've been a part of since the beginning, even the musician in the band, you think, okay, this is what the band's supposed to sound like. We can't stray too far from that. So I would think as a session musician, that's part of what keeps it fresh for you. But when you go in to do a project, you never know what the band's going to really kind of sound like until you get down to doing your first session. No,
exactly. You know, and I would record. I record other people's drums, and I use like another. I would MIDI their drum tracks, and what I would do is I would change it up so that it's not going to sound the same on the album. You know, or change up my bass sound or my bass style. And there's a lot of people like are like-minded as well, and they'll go into that. They'll kind of follow that. Say, yeah, let's you know. So he says that's so and so, the guitar player on it. They go, no way, you know.
Yeah.
That's what I like. That's what I like. I like to you know surprise people with things. So
yeah, wow. And so that's got to make it for have an interesting career. And you know, another thing I want to talk to you about is you got this podcast that I was listening to, and I listened to the episode. You know, what you did on the 5 albums. Talk a little bit about that, and you know, then we can talk.
Yeah, the 5 albums. That's what the 5 albums that basically got me into playing bass, or interested in playing bass first. And you know, I thought, and those 5 albums were all purchased on the same day. Yeah. And it was funny how that worked out, but I mean, you know, I had ZZ Top, I had Song Remains the Same. Yeah. You know, Stevie Wonder's. I can't remember what Stevie Wonder album it was.
Oh well, I got the list right here. So if you want me to do that real quick, okay. So for Stevie Wonder, for Stevie Wonder, it's Songs in the Key of Life.
Life.
And you picked the song to talk about, Wish. So talk about the album, why that album means so much to you.
I loved the way the whole album was. I mean, I love all the songs on the album. I love just the production. I mean, Stevie with Motown was amazing, and I don't know. I just loved. I mean, I would hear that song on the radio all the time, right? Like I Wish. And Nathan Watts played bass on it, and actually Stevie played drums on that. A lot of people don't know that, but
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was something that just, man, it was such a great song.
And
great album.
See, what I'm interested to hear guys like you influenced by somebody like Stevie Wonder is because, for example, because of my age, like when I think of Stevie Wonder, I think that hit he had in the 80s, I Just Called to Say I Love You. It was a big music video and all over the charts and stuff. And there's so much more than Stevie Wonder just said. People often think of him not just because he's an amazing singer, for the fact when you consider, he's a blind musician. And it's hard enough to learn to play an instrument, but when you're blind, especially something like the piano, and he's an amazing piano player, so there's all this depth to what Stevie Wonder does. But then you go back and you listen to also another one of my favorite songs that people may or may not be aware is like Superstitious. He's kind of all over the place with that tune, and it's even like a bit of an edge to that song, So Stevie Wonder is one of those musicians that he's kind of all over the place. And then,
exactly. And I was following him since Motown. I'm a big Motown guy.
Yeah.
So and that also helped my bass playing as well. Listen to James Jamerson, and those guys.
And then and then the other album
Stevie was cool.
And your number 2 album was ZZ Top's Fandango, great choice. And we should talk a little bit about ZZ Top because, of course, Dusty Hill recently passed away, and of course, he's the bass sound of ZZ Top. So talk a little bit about how his death affected you.
There's a few musicians who've passed that I've really took to heart. It really affected me.
Yeah.
And Dusty was one of those guys that was a great player, solid as they come, kept things simple, great vocalist, great writer, and I thought, that whole ZZ Top thing, that will it be the same?
That's what I was going to get to because as crazy as it sounds to say, there are some bands where the image is just as important as the music. And I think ZZ Top is one of the bands because they had the whole thing with the beards. And I mean, I've heard for years that like the Gillette shaving company like offered those guys like $1 million to shave off those long beards, and they just they wouldn't do it because it's their trademark. It makes sense. Now, here's the whole thing. As silly as this sounds, and it's not for really me to tell ZZ Top what to do, but I really can't imagine going to see a ZZ Top concert without Dusty Hill for a lot of reasons, but also there's that visual thing, the two guys with a long beard standing on the, I really, and I guess he kind of handpicked his replacement from what I understand, but there's something to be said for that, but what's your thoughts on ZZ Top continuing on without him?
You know what? I'm really cool with it.
Yeah.
Especially Dusty's wishes.
Yeah.
His guitar tech. I'm cool with it.
I guess too that
of an amazing era.
Yeah. I guess it kind of, like you said, they must have known he was ill for a while. The fact that he kind of handpicked the guy, so and the fact that he was a roadie or whatever, they kept it in the family, So I guess it's good for that, if nothing else.
Yeah, well, you know what? I would probably do the same thing if I was in Dusty's shoes.
Yeah.
And I want the guys to have someone that was trusted, someone, like not bringing in someone else that may mess things up, someone that I know. Yeah. And, guitar tech, yep, go for it.
And then your number 3 album that you talked about was Led Zeppelin's, Celebration Day and also Song Remains the Same. 2 very different albums, so talk about that.
Celebration Day, I really, really love that song from Led Zeppelin 3. And when I heard the live version, the more simplistic version, like there wasn't, 3 guitars on it, overlaying, I really, really had to learn that song perfectly.
Yeah.
Because I wanted my band to play it at that time. One of the bands I was in. One of the guys, Terry, he was really good at doing Jimmy Page, so it was like, let's get into this. And I must have hit that part of the record a million times just to try to, make sure during the solo I wanted note for note. But you know what? That was just one of my, and it still is one of my favorite songs. And
Celebration Day, I got to talk about for a minute because, like maybe it's 10, 11 years ago when they did that reunion with Jason Bonham, and they recorded like a DVD and a live CD of the event, and it took place in some stadium or indoor arena in London, and I'm friends with this Led Zeppelin tribute band. These guys that call themselves Led Zeppelin. They're like the premier Led Zeppelin tribute from Los Angeles, and the singer Swan was telling me that Jimmy Page and the guys were so impressed with their show and their kind of recreation of Led Zeppelin and their music that they actually got flown over on a plane by Led Zeppelin, to London, and they were their special guests backstage. I mean, can you imagine being in that tribute band? How cool is that? That's the ultimate kind of recognition.
Yeah, that is very cool. That is very cool. And I guess those guys must have pitching themselves too, right?
Yeah, I would think so. But I mean, they look dead on. They play the part, and I guess if you're going to be a tribute act, it's kind of like rock and roll theater. I mean, these guys are real musicians, and they get the music really down. But I enjoy the part of seeing them like really dress up like the part, because for a lot of people who never got to see Led Zeppelin, that's as close as you're going to get, and it kind of makes it fun to go. You're kind of recreating something for people, even people that were there back in the day, and diehard Led Zeppelin fans are like, man, you took me back to the first time I ever heard Stairway to Heaven or Rock and Roll or Black Dog and all that stuff.
Exactly.
And now, being a Led Zeppelin fan, you also mentioned Song Remains the Same. Of course, that was a soundtrack in a movie. What do you remember back in the day when you saw the movie? What was that like to have your rock and roll heroes say, "Oh wow, they made a movie. That's pretty cool."
Yeah, I think in Toronto on Danforth Avenue, there was a theater, and they used to run Led Zeppelin Song Remains the Same, and Pink Floyd The Wall.
Wow.
And I mean, and we used to go all the time because we'd go before we'd show up at a party or whatever.
Yeah.
We'd watch the movie, and it was just like we do it like twice a month, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, back in the day where it was just like smoke-filled theater, everyone was partying and everyone was having a good time, and there was hardly any problems whatsoever. But I used to be in awe.
Yeah. When
I
see that movie,
I really did. I thought, man, and you know what? It was one of these things where after seeing that movie, it's like, whoa, that's definitely what I want to do. Yeah,
and now you brought up Pink Floyd, so I want to ask you, even though they're not on your one of your top 5 albums, were you at all influenced by Pink Floyd, and what did you think of them?
Well, I love Pink Floyd. Yeah. They were, Dark Side of the Moon was probably my favorite Floyd album. Wish You Were Here as well, but Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, yes.
And what about The Wall?
One of the first songs I learned was Money.
Oh, cool.
Money.
Yeah. And what about The Wall? I ask because I like a lot of the stuff, on the album. The movie's kind of freaky. It's a little different and far out. So that's kind of what I want to ask you about. What did you think of the movie versus the album?
Oh, I thought the movie was great.
Yeah.
I thought it was fantastic. I like the artistic nature of it. I like the story. I like how I just like everything between animation and I loved it. And I loved the album too.
Yeah.
I thought about the album was that, man, you can really tell the different, like, are they writing this stuff alone? Like Roger Waters and Gilmour?
Well, I'll tell you the biggest I'll tell you the biggest difference for me between The Wall and Dark Side of the Moon is on The Wall. That's when they brought in Bob Ezrin, and he's the producer that produced Kiss's Destroyer, and he produced all those great Alice Cooper albums. He's still working with Alice today, so he's the guy they brought in for that, and he's an amazing producer, and I think that's why The Wall sounded so much different, than say Dark Side of the Moon. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, Bob Ezrin, I love that guy.
In fact, Bob Ezrin is much more of a producer. He's an actual musician and songwriter. I mean, if you look at any of the albums he's produced, he's involved with the songwriting, and he even plays keyboards on some of the stuff. So he's all over the place, and I love everything he's ever been a part of.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
And then
I agree.
And then I guess number 4 on your list was Live at Leeds. The Who. You really can't go wrong there.
Oh man, that album just blew me away. with the squeaky guitar chord and all.
Yeah.
The patch chord. Yeah, no, I mean, that thing, I thought, okay. And I mean, I know we still have 2 to go, but the last 2 bands I'm going to talk about, I think I've seen The Who live more times than any other band that I've seen.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, if I were to be in a band, this is what I would want. Like, when I walked out on stage, I would like bandmates like this. I'd like the energy like this. They did it all for me.
And I think part of the reason The Who is such a great band, I mean, not just the musicianship, the songwriting, but I think part of, especially when you look at Roger Walters and Pete Daltrey and Townsend, they had this love-hate thing going. So there's that thing to be said that friction creates some beautiful music. And in their case, it really does. And then, a lot of times when we're growing up, we don't take the time to look at who wrote the song. But when you stop and realize, Pete Townsend, he wrote all those great Who songs. He wrote, most of those hit songs. Whereas, because a lot of times it's the lead singer that writes the song, but in this case, it's the guitar player who wrote most of the hits, and the singer is kind of just, it's his voice. He's a vehicle to get the songs out, if you know what I mean. Whereas a lot of people, you talk about The Who, they kind of tell you The Who is really a 3-piece band, and they just added this one guy who's a singer,
Yeah, no, exactly. And another great rhythm section. I mean, that was all over the place, but they were solid as heck. Ant Whistle and Moon.
And so, obviously,
that album just blew me away. Like when they segue off into something else.
Yeah.
And it's like, in an interview, I think they asked Ant Whistle, like, was that planned? Yeah, but we didn't rehearse it. And I thought, we didn't rehearse that? Wow.
Yeah, amazing. And it's one of those premier live albums. When people talk about live albums, that's one of the albums they always kind of point to. And as great of a drummer as Keith Moon was, I got to ask you, when he dies and stuff, what did that mean to you? And what did you think of him bringing Kenny Jones in to replace him?
I was kind of indifferent about it. I thought, Kenny's a great player.
Yeah.
I think because a lot of people didn't know what Kenny did before.
Yeah, small. Yeah.
And I mean, I appreciated that because I knew he was a good drummer.
Yeah.
But I couldn't really see them bringing in someone else like Keith Moon. The antics, things like that. It's like now it's the 3 of us and a drummer.
Yeah, it's interesting that Led Zeppelin took a different route when their drummer died, and they kind of made the decision that no, we're not going to replace him. We're just going to. It's time for the band to kind of call it a day. I mean, and the few times they've gone back together, I guess his son was given his drum stool, so to speak. So and rightfully so. So I think they did it kind of maybe in a better way. I don't know, just because I'm a Who fan. I'm glad they've carried on. I mean, they're still kind of putting out new music and touring. I think they're finally talking about going on their farewell tour, but COVID got in a little bit of the way, so we'll see what happens there.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And then I guess your last album on the list.
I love Jason Bottom. Jason Bottom is amazing, and you know what? I hear that he's a really nice guy too.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. And these days he's playing with Sammy Hagar, and and they got this band called The Circle, and they do. Obviously, a lot of what they do is Van Halen tunes. They do Led Zeppelin tunes, and they got this great CD they put out. Like, I guess it was Jason's idea that he challenged them, like, hey, let's learn a different cover every day. And so they got enough cover material together. They put out a great cover CD, and it's pretty cool stuff. I mean, everything from Bob Marley to the Who even that we're talking about. So and they cover Van Halen tunes on the CD, so that's pretty cool.
Right.
And talk about Foghat Live. That's the final album on your top 5 list.
Yeah. You know what? They were probably one of my favorite all-time American bands.
And it's funny that
Yeah.
It's funny you call them an American band because they started out in England, didn't they? And then they came over here to America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, and they got most of their airplay, they got most of their sales in the United States.
Yeah.
And it was funny because like that album is just solid. Solid musicianship, solid everything.
Yeah.
You know, you could put a metronome to the beats per minute from the beginning of the song, and right at the end of the song, it would be the same.
Yeah,
that's how tight these guys were.
You know, Foghat is. I got a little history with those guys as far as having the opportunity to interview Roger Earl a number of times, and I recently interviewed the singer Charlie Hunnam. Sadly, all the original guys have passed on except for Roger. He's kind of kept the band going all these years, and so I got a huge amount of respect for that. And and he didn't just pick out any kind of replacement members. The guys he got in the band now, they're equally as good as those original guys, and they're not going in really trying to change the Foghat sound. I mean, they continue to pump out new music, so I respect them for that. You know, they're not just living on their legacy. And in the new music, I got to say, is just as, it's just as good, some of it, as the original stuff. So kudos for them, because they're celebrating 50 years this year.
No, exactly. And you know what? I've been listening to a lot of the newer stuff lately.
Yeah.
And I'm really digging it. I'm definitely digging it.
In fact, they got a new live DVD and CD combo. It's a live thing they did from it's called live at Daryl's house, but I think the CD is called 8 days live 8 days or something like that, and you can get it on Amazon. But they do a cool version of Wild Cherry's Play That Funky Music, because I think the bass player played on the original version, and they just kill it.
Really?
Yeah, and it's cool to kind of have that kind of package, because you can watch the DVD and see what the band does live, and again, they just kill it live. And then if you want to listen to it like in your car when you're driving, it's a pretty cool thing to have.
I'm gonna look for that. Jason.
In fact, I'll send you a link to it. I'll send you a link to it later, so through Facebook, so you can check that out. But it's pretty cool stuff, and again, so I dig the fact that Foghat is still around, and Roger. Interesting, like just talking a little bit about Foghat. If you look at like the song "Slow Ride," I love that drum track. I mean, just the drums that even the bass track. That's one of those rhythm tracks that it goes all through the song. So I'd imagine you ever try to play that track or learn how to play it?
You know what? Probably when I was younger.
Yeah.
We played a few Foghat tunes, and we also did like "Honey Hush." Yeah. Which is great song. I think there's a few bands that did that opening riff or had that riff, but
Foghat is one of those bands, very influential. Sometimes they don't get the dues they deserve, because your jokes about they play the local state fair, but I tell you, they're still killing it. They're still and even the current singer Charlie Hunnam, I had a chance to talk to him. He's a pretty cool guy. I mean, and he's played with everybody from Ted Nugent to Humble Pie. So I mean, the talent in that band is just amazing.
Fantastic. Hey, you know what? Send me that link for sure.
I will definitely when we get through in a few minutes. And I guess the last thing I want to talk about is I know probably the one project that most people know you from is Hollywood Monsters. Talk a little bit about that real quick.
Hollywood Monsters. The main dude, Hollywood Monsters, Stepan in France. We were talking online, and we did a few tracks together, and he's like, okay, I don't know what to do next. I don't know, what I'm going to do. I got a few possible. I said, put out another Hollywood Monsters album. So I said, look, I'll play bass on it if you want. Like, we'll do it together. And he said, okay. So he had a number of songs, and we figured out a few covers to do, and we got together a bunch of great musicians to play on the album. So that's what we did, and it was we released it, and it's in Brazil, distribution company, and in Japan. So the Japan copies of Thriving on Chaos is pretty cool.
Yeah, oh, cool. And so people can still purchase that if they want, right? Or go online and check it out at least? Okay. Well, Ronnie, I'm really glad I got a chance to talk to you today. It was great finally getting a chance to do the interview for real this time. And anything else that you're currently working on that you want to let folks know about?
I got a few covers that I'm doing, going to be doing with some amazing musicians. I won't say who, what, or where, or when, but I'm moving my recording studio to a commercial spot pretty soon. It's almost 90% sure that it's going to happen, and gets me out of the house now.
That's cool. Yeah.
I think, you know, with COVID and everything else, I think it's time to go. But the few things I'm working on, yes, I've got. I'm writing a few songs too. One of them, my late friend and vocalist, before he passed away, he sent me a song idea, and I've been listening to it. And actually, I'm going to do that one on piano. I'm going to finish it off.
Oh,
writing.
cool.
So, yeah. So, you know what? I'm keeping busy. I'm keeping positive, and I just keep on practicing, rehearsing, and having fun with it. And that's the main thing.
That is so cool. So I'll tell you what, Ronnie, we'll keep in touch, and I'm sure we'll do another interview down the line. But this one should begin posting in about 2-3 weeks. I'll let you know as soon as it gets posted. So thanks for doing the interview today, and I will be in touch, and I will send you the link as soon as we get done with this. Take care.
Yes, thank you, Jason. Thank you very much.
And I want to give a huge shout out to Christina for hooking me up with you. So otherwise,
yeah, you know what?
Yeah.
Thank you, my East Coast promoter, Christina Avila. Thank you very much, sweetheart.
Yeah, she's cool at what she does. So take care.
Oh yeah, she's great.
Okay, bye-bye.